Thanks a lot, Cristiano. That was a very generous introduction. So I know why I'm here. I'm here because AI is an incredibly important topic for your profession. And it's great to see it consume the entirety of your agenda today. What we're going to do is talk not so much about the technology, but on what it means for organizations and management. In other words, what it means for people like you who are responsible for the processes and their integrity inside the enterprises that you work for. So I'm honored that I can be with you today to do this together. We are going to start out with the potential of AI, and clearly that potential is vast. If you look at the progression of the technology over time, we're trying to, there we go. We will get this. We see people like Google's Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, saying that AI may be more transformative than electricity or fire. It clearly has this potential to change not just your life and your organization, but the world. And if we look at the quantified progression of AI over time, we see that bearing out. You see on this chart how imagery and image recognition slowly improved over time from being a little subpar versus a human to exceeding human capabilities. And then if you look at the last line on that graph about competition math, you see this rapid progression. The pattern, of course, is clear. The rate of progression is increasing all the time. The lines are getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And many of these have exceeded human capabilities. But the progression is inconsistent and it's not uniform. There's a lot of talk in circles about AI, about AGI, artificial general intelligence. When will a computer be smarter than a human? And that is the wrong question. We don't need one single computer program to be the Swiss Army knife of life, to do everything imaginable so that humans do nothing. It's not really how it works. What we see is that in distinct domains, different sorts of computerization start to exceed human capabilities. So we shouldn't think of this overall metacognition program that's going to take everybody's place. No, that's not how it works. We can think of things in specialized domains having an impact on us personally, and certainly on our jobs and our organizations. That's what matters. And as that happens, there are some areas where AI is going to stay incredibly stupid. It's what we call the jagged edge of AI progression. There are some real highs and some real lows. I was speaking recently with a big movie theater chain, and they had gotten the great idea of having an AI algorithm look at your past movie-going behavior, and from that infer what recommendations it could give you about new releases. Oh, pretty cool. So they decided they were going to try it out in the analytics team. And a small circle of people got the initial recommendations. The second recommendation that the head of the analytics department got was for a movie called Night Sweat, which is a horror movie set in a swimming pool. And he came to his team the next day and said, "Gang, what is going on? I hate horror movies. It scares the bejesus out of me. Why did I get a recommendation for a horror movie if I've never seen a horror movie at this chain of movie theaters ever before?" So they looked into the algorithm and they thought, what could possibly trigger it? And they discovered, and they said, well, Jeff, actually, as you know, Night Swim is set around the swimming pool, and you have seen 6 movies about swimming pools. So in some respects, AI doesn't get it at all. Okay, Jeff probably didn't know that he had seen 6 movies about swimming pools, so it got that, but it didn't get what was important. And so we still need the humans to understand what's important. We'll get into what that means for you and your organizations. You see the progression there of how AI is reaching human levels, but we haven't seen anything yet. So I am talking to you today about my new book. It just came out actually a week ago today, called AI and the Octopus Organization. I co-wrote this book with the futurist in residence at Amazon. And he has calculated that the outputs of normal AI models, the ones that we typically use today, are going to increase in quality by about 30 times by 2030. 30 times in 5 years. And the cost per token, the cost per computing unit in that same time period will decline by about 100,000 times. So that is a remarkable rate of progression that we're going to be seeing. All right, I want to get a baseline here about how AI is infusing your work today. So if you use AI, let's say this year in your job, could you please just clap once? Okay. What about this week did you use it? Okay. What about since I started speaking? Okay. So one time that we don't want applause, right? Good. So AI has this tremendous capability. It seems that it's being pretty broadly applied. Yet there's a problem. There's a problem. We have all of these AI pilots that we're taking on in organizations. And our boats are sinking under the weight of all of these pilots. There was a recent study by MIT this summer that got a lot of publicity. It said that 95% of AI pilots are failing to meet profitability objectives. 95% are not having a material impact on costs or revenues. 95%. But you know what they're doing is not only costing you a good amount of money, even more importantly, they're costing you a good amount of time. It's a tremendous distraction to do all this stuff that doesn't go anywhere. And this happens again and again with technology. The legacy of digital transformation is not in the distant past. And there are myriad examples of how that didn't produce a material change in a company's fortunes. But it did create distraction. And so the question is, what do we do about it? Now, the first thing you would say is, okay, we have to recognize AI is important. Thankfully, that first hurdle in most organizations has already been crossed. In a recent Gallup survey, 80% of senior executives at organizations said that AI was important to their future plans. Great. What's not great is that 15% of those same executives said that their organizations had a coherent strategy for how to scale AI. 80, 15. It's a big gap. And that's our challenge. Thankfully, it's one that I'll be talking about today. Unfortunately, the plans that we see often for scaling AI are not really about getting the maximum potential out of the technology. Instead, it's a little bit of AI dust that's sprinkled on top of what you do now. And it has some really cool features, but it doesn't change what's underneath. It doesn't change how you operate. It doesn't change the workflows. It doesn't change the structure. It doesn't change the responsibilities of people. And so you get a little AI-ification of the present, but you don't get meaningful results. And that's one reason why little pilot after little pilot after little pilot isn't going to change anything, because it doesn't change what's happening underneath. We have to get more fundamental to get to the impact. So to tell you about how this occurs, we're going to have to go back in time a little bit. Actually, we're going to go way back in time to the prehistoric oceans. The creature that you're looking at is probably one that you're not familiar with. It's called the ammonite. And in the prehistoric oceans of about 100 million years ago, the ammonites ruled. There were over 1,000 species of ammonites, estimated actually to be up to like 10,000 species of ammonites. Some were a few inches, and some could be 10 feet across. They were gigantic. And they had evolved over millennia to be supremely well adapted for the environment in which they lived. They had these super thick, tightly coiled shells that could protect them against these ghastly predators under the seas, these dinosaur fish with the humongous jaws. They could be impervious to that sort of thing, and they could survive. And so they thrived. Until one day, very abruptly, a meteor about the size of Manhattan struck the Earth 66 million years ago. And it created a dust cloud which enveloped the Earth and killed 75% of the species on Earth, including most of the dinosaurs. And it rendered the ammonites extinct because in that dust cloud there was sulfur. And the sulfur created acid rain. And the acid rain dissolved the shells of the young ammonites. So almost instantly, the ammonites went extinct. They were supremely well adapted for the environment that they had evolved into over tens of millions of years. But when the meteor struck, that was it. They had no ability to adjust. We don't want to be like ammonites. We don't want to be like the fossils that are all that remain of the ammonites. But a lot of companies are very much constructed like them. They've evolved over many years to have rigid defenses against known predators. And then when the meteor strikes, they've got nothing. And they go extinct. And we have seen that in wave after wave of disruption. As Cristiano mentioned, I worked for many years with Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School. He coined the term disruptive innovation. And he chronicled in industry after industry after industry, disruption occurs. And the incumbents are often not well adapted to survive. Those that just continue on that same old trajectory like the ammonites, they're extinct. What we need is a different approach to thrive. Because AI is the meteor strike today. It's going to fundamentally change how you do business as an organization, but how you do business externally. It's going to fundamentally change the economy. And if we're not adapted to that sort of change, we will become extinct. We need a different model, which is not the ammonite. It is the octopus. Hence the title of the book, AI and the Octopus Organization. Now, some of you may be looking at that and saying, or thinking, that is so tasty. I love octopus. Let's go back, Cristiano, please. I promise you, at the end of the speech, I don't think you're ever going to eat octopus again. Because the octopus is a remarkable creature. It's actually 297 million years old. That's the oldest fossil that we found of an octopus. Now, okay, it had 10 arms, but it had an ink sac. It was extremely similar to octopuses today. They haven't changed all that much. 297 million years, by the way, is 70 million years older than the dinosaurs. So octopuses have been around a really long time. Now, there's no shell around an octopus. It was very exposed to things like dinosaur fish. And yet, it has a remarkable adaptation capability. So while the ammonites, while humans are largely governed by our DNA, which we inherit and we really can't do very much about, the octopus also has DNA, but it has a remarkably unusual capability to recode its RNA on the fly. I'll take you back to high school biology. So RNA interacts with the DNA to translate the DNA's instructions to the rest of the cells. It's the messaging connection between the DNA and the rest of your cells. You can't really change the DNA, but if you could change the RNA, then you change what that DNA means to the rest of the organization of the octopus. You can take an octopus from the Antarctic and you can pop it into the Caribbean, and within a matter of hours, it will be fine because it has this ability to recode its RNA. Now, organizations, of course, they have DNA too. They have cultures and legacy assets. People sometimes talk about, we need to change the DNA. Well, good luck. That is really, really hard to do. But you can change the RNA. The RNA of how you translate who you are, what your legacy is as an organization, to the present day, to the rest of the organization. And that's the job of management. People like you, frankly, who can talk about the processes that actually take place in an organization and modernize them. Yeah, they're influenced by the DNA. You're not going to get away from that. But the RNA is that critical translation. The octopus is still going to have 8 arms. You're not going to change that with the RNA, but you can change a lot else. So the adaptation capabilities of the octopus are not just things that we see from the Antarctic to the Caribbean. They're things that occur almost in real time. We can look at a little video here, and we'll see, is there an octopus in this video somewhere? All right, how many of you saw the octopus before it came out? Nobody. Are you a scuba diver? Okay. All right, so you have that octopus eye. That's very good. All right, we're going to show it again. And let's see if you see it emerge now. It's extraordinary. They can change their color, their texture, their shape, the way they move. They're remarkably adapted to the environments that they're in. That's how they survived the meteor. They could adapt super quickly. Now, we need to go back in time again a bit. Not 66 million years, but still before our time, to see how this can play out with organizations. Let's go back 150 years ago to the era of steam-powered factories. So before we had electricity, still had to power the machinery in factories. After the water wheel of the early industrial revolution, before electricity, you had steam. Huge infrastructures of steam to operate machinery. And they were really impressive and really cool. But there were issues. Steam was expensive to produce with all the coal that you had to burn. It could be really finicky in terms of how it operated. Machines would break down, pressure would vary. And so sometimes the operation of the machine would vary with the pressure. So you couldn't get very consistent machinery operations. You couldn't put steam to every little corner of the factory floor. And so electricity came along around the 1880s. And this was really revolutionary. But you know what? It took about 20 years for factories to broadly encompass electrification, because it took a while to swap out the infrastructure. And people were a little bit hesitant and they were slow to make decisions. But clearly there was an advantage. And eventually factories became electrified. And it was a little bit better. The machinery was more reliable, could be placed in more places. And yet there hadn't been a really massive improvement in productivity until this happened, the assembly line. So this is a picture of a Ford assembly line back in 1915. It was the assembly line that unlocked the potential of electrification. Each of the stations for the operators in a factory could be independently electrically powered. And of course, the assembly line itself was electrically powered as well. And the difference was staggering. The production time for a Model T went from 12 hours to 93 minutes. The cost of the car went from $850 to $260. The wages of the workers assembling the car doubled. It was a huge unlock of productivity. But it wasn't the technology per se. It was the way the organization used the technology. And that is a theme we see again and again and again with technology. It's not the technology itself. It's how you use it. It's what you unlock in terms of the great productivity expansion, the great quality expansion. What was remarkable about the assembly line is that things could be cheaper, but better, and also produced faster than ever before. Cheaper, faster, better, all at the same time. That was the unlock with electricity. So it's not the technology, it's us and how we use it. Now, today, of course, factories have progressed. And here's a video of a new Hyundai factory that's just been constructed. About a $7 billion investment. And what do you see? Robot, 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 robot. You know what you don't see in this video? Humans. Now, this could never happen, of course, without electricity. And so we have unlocked not just the second order effect of electrification, which was the assembly line, but we're on the third and fourth order effects now. And we see this gigantic transformation in how manufacturing is done. We are barely looking around the corner today at what AI can unleash. Now, 25 years ago, when I was pretty early in my career, I was responsible for part of another technological innovation, which was the smartphone. I was working on a British company called Scion, which had developed the personal digital system back in the 80s. And we were developing some of the first smartphones for Motorola and Ericsson. And that was my baby. This is back around 1999, 2000. We were so excited about the technology. Oh man, look at that screen. It's a color screen and it's huge. It's beautiful. You can have maps, you can have games, you can even have short videos on the phone. Oh man, this was extraordinary. I was on British TV explaining the potential of the device, and I was very proudly recounting it. And a few days later, I saw my landlady outside my flat. And she turned to me and she said, "Steve, what is it that you do?" She had seen my video and what I was talking about so proudly. And so I explained to her, "Oh, we could be connected and you can play games and you can know where you are and you can do emails on your phone." And she said, "Oh, just send a text." And you know what this phone was pretty bad at? Was sending a text. Because he couldn't point at screens yet. The capacity of screens to detect finger touches wasn't really there. You had to have a stylus. So you had to like sort of poke out each letter of a text. And actually an old style candy bar phone was much faster and more efficient at sending a text. And there's a lesson in that. You can have the future vision of all the technology can become, but you got to satisfy the British landlady with her text as well. You need both. You need the near-term on-ramp and the long-term vision. And sadly, a lot of the dialogue about AI is this or that, this or that. We don't create the bridge. We don't see, okay, where are we going? But then what are we going to do to start getting there? How do we make sure we can send a text, but also try to accomplish something that's big and beautiful like that? The folks at MIT weren't very impressed. 2002, pretty cool if you don't mind talking into a calculator. You can tell I'm still taking that a little personally. MIT. They didn't have the long-term vision, ironically, for MIT. So, okay, yeah, it was a little clunky looking, granted, guilty. But you had to have the long-term vision, and yet, well, maybe they were right. Maybe that thing did look a little bit like a calculator. So you need to have both. We need to look around the corners. We need to see what things can unlock and the on-ramp. Now, with a mobile phone, with the smartphone, it wasn't just that you could send an email from the beach while on vacation. I mean, if that's all you aspired to, I'm sorry. Things like true streaming media were barely on our horizon. Certainly social media was something that we never considered. Uber was something we never considered, but all of these things were unlocked by smartphone technology. Those were the second order effects of smartphones. And that's where the true economic value of the smartphone lay. It wasn't talking into a calculator. It wasn't being able to see your calendar. It was in things like Uber and Facebook that the real economic value came. And so we need to think for our organizations about where is that second order effect? What are those long-term sources of economic value that get unlocked by the AI revolution? Today, we tend to focus on the technology itself. We get very excited about things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Perplexity, Claude, Grok. Whew. That's great. But you know what? The leaderboard is going to keep changing. Every few months, it's going to change. And some things are going to be better at some applications. Others will be better at other applications. It's really not the point. You can be certain that any of these is going to be a lot better 3 years from now than it is today. That matters. But what really matters underneath that is our ability to use that technology. The ability to use the smartphone, to use electrification. That's what matters. So we're thinking about AI all wrong if we think about just the technology. It's an enabler, but the real revolution lies with us. It lies in how we manage and in the shape of our organizations. And that is the theme of AI and the Octopus Organization. How does AI enable you to have octopus organizations with remarkable capabilities to adapt? We need a new model. One reason we chose the octopus was not just because of its incredible capabilities of adaptation, but because its biology is just plain weird. The octopus, of course, has 8 arms. I think you knew that. What you probably didn't know is that each arm has a mini brain. Octopuses have 9 brains. 3 hearts, by the way. They're really remarkably odd creatures. There's a nerve ring that connects each of the arms so that the brains can communicate with each other without ever involving the central one in the head. So one arm can be opening a clam and another arm can be exploring a cave. And the central brain is thinking, how do I get away from that shark? All at the same time. You have this massively parallel capability with an octopus. And then when the shark actually approaches, the central brain can say, okay, time to coordinate. And all the arms coordinate together to escape as rapidly as possible. And that is a metaphor for an AI-infused organization, where it's not just 9 brains, it's almost infinite brains that are out there, where you can operate massively in parallel and have tremendous results, so long as you have a little bit of central coordination too. Now, this is not just science fiction. We see this today. Any of you work with investment management firms? No investment management firms. Okay. Well, I dug up a picture of what a trading floor can look like. I found this. It turns out that they really needed an internal audit function at this organization, by the way. And sadly, they did not have that. And sadly, also, Leo DiCaprio does not work at most investment management firms. So that is not actually a model of an AI-infused organization, but this is a high-frequency trading firm. And this is how it looks, where you have humans, but they are surrounded by computers. And is a true merger of human and machine that creates the results. The humans come up with the algorithms. The humans detect, are the algorithms working appropriately or not? Are we taking undue risks or not? What sort of outcomes are we getting from our algorithms? How do they need to be refined? So humans are there, but it is the machines that are placing the high-frequency trades in milliseconds, faster than any human ever could. Without AI, a high-frequency trading term could not function. It is fundamental to the operation. So we do have AI-infused businesses today. The humans at them are often very highly skilled because they know how to get the most out of these AI systems. And these high-frequency traders do quite well for themselves. One of the remarkable things about AI is that it can ensure that the right information goes to the right person at the right time. And so the humans aren't desperately looking around trying to find out what's going on, but the AI helps to funnel the information to them. That's probably something very relevant for internal audit, I would imagine. So they can use their capabilities where they're most useful. It's not a boring job at all. It's not just looking at the screens, but it's looking at what's important. What are the exceptions? What are the edge cases? That's where they can focus their very highly skilled capabilities. So then what does this mean for the people in an organization? We're going to look at 3 levels of the organization. We're going to look at the frontline, middle managers, and senior leaders. We're actually going to start with the frontline because in an Octopus organization, where each arm has its own brain, you can have a lot of decentralization of authority. And the front line becomes the center of how you do business. You might think it is already today, but it can be even much more so with an Octopus organization where AI really supercharges the capabilities of people at the front line. Now, going to a doctor over the past 10 years or so, to me at least, has become a pretty frustrating experience. You sit and you're telling the doctor a very personal thing, and the guy's just typing into his machine, looking at the screen. And I feel almost like I'm talking to a computer with a very highly trained intermediary in the middle, very highly trained typist. In healthcare organizations, one of the earliest and most phenomenally successful deployments of AI has been in these consultations, has been to passively listen as a physician and her patient are talking. It can record the entire conversation, can create a transcript of that conversation, but then it can also create a summary of what occurred. And it can link that summary to the rest of a patient's record so that the next clinician to see that patient has a full synopsis of what's important. Average primary care physician in the United States has about 2,000 patients. I'm sorry to say they don't remember your history. I know we like to think that. No, they don't. They don't. They are reading the notes, but they're not reading them very effectively when each consultation is scheduled to be 12 to 15 minutes. With AI, that becomes a very different proposition. If in 1 minute they can get the whole relevant patient history and see what mattered. So this is already having a fundamental impact on the experience at the front line of medical care. There has been a 44% increase in the quality of physician-patient interactions measured by things like patient retention of instructions that they're given. 44%. But then there's also been a 60% increase in how physicians feel about their burnout, positively, of course, and an 80% improvement in job satisfaction. Those are unbelievable numbers. And it's because AI is being deployed appropriately at the front line. That doctors can be doctors again, not typists. They can do what they originally went to medical school to do. And patients feel that improvement too. So this is what AI can create at the front line. You can create this tremendous empowerment at the front line, freeing people from the drudgery of routine tasks, enabling them to do what they're really trained to do. But there's cautionary tale. Back around 1900, Navy ships had a tremendous amount of authority. A naval captain was sort of the master of his destiny. He could go out and follow the commander's intent as best as he could do and try to achieve the objectives. And by 1930, that had fundamentally changed. And it was due to one great technological innovation. Any guesses on what that technological innovation was? No, but airplanes were enabled by this too. It's the radio. The radio. Because admirals could now exert authority on their captains, they did. We have got to be very careful about doing that. Now, sure, sometimes you need to exert authority on the captains. The great naval battles of World War II could never have been coordinated without the use of the radio. But we don't want to dumb down the organization. We don't want to make it just the blind executors of orders from on high. We don't want to make technology the reason that senior people can meddle with the front lines. And that is a cautionary tale for you folks, internal auditors. You can observe, but that doesn't necessarily mean to dictate and to change. Instead, we should think about how physicians have evolved, how they practice medicine. If you go back 100 years ago, if you had a problem that you reported to with the doctor, if it's a serious problem, they may well have opened you up to take a look around and see what's going on. And now that very seldom happens, at least as a first step. You get a bunch of blood tests and maybe x-rays or a CT scan, MRI, something like that. The physician can see inside of you, and because they can see inside and discern what's going on, they actually don't have to meddle as much. They meddle in only the most important cases. They can detect those. And this is what AI can do for you. It can bring you those most important cases. I was speaking recently with a banking regulator, and they have recently started deploying AI in the exams that they do. Previously, they would look at customer complaints to a big institution, and there might be 1 million of those, and they would sort of randomly sample them. And now AI can flag ones where, okay, if it's rude customer service, the regulator doesn't really care. I'm sorry you had a bad experience. If it was a deceptive claim, they care. And so they can start discerning what those are. So the same thing applies to you. You can see what's truly important and start, like the physician, intervening when it's really necessary, but not probing around when it's not. So we don't want to become the admirals of the 1930s, intervening just because we can. We want to intervene where we should. That requires some human discipline. As humans are sort of conditioned to intervene where we can. We want to intervene where we should. Now, the nature of frontline work is going to change, and the people doing that frontline work are going to change. We see this in what is already happening with entry-level employees. It's getting harder and harder for new college grads to find jobs in professions that are AI-enabled, AI-infused. And look, I take this very personally. I have 3 kids who are reaching college age, and I wonder what sort of workforce are they going to be graduating into? It's a really important issue. It's not our issue for today, but I raise it because we do have to think about where our future workers are coming from. There's a trend right now for people to want folks who have a few years of experience. That's much better than just a new green grad where AI can replicate a lot of things that they would already do. But where are those people with 2 or 3 years experience going to come from if we don't hire people at an entry level? So just something to consider. All right, so for the front line then, we have some fundamental implications of work involving more challenging issues and potentially involving more more experienced people to execute on the front line as well. Let's now take a look at middle management. In middle management, there is an astonishing waste of capability. About 3/4 of middle managers' time is spent on administrative stuff. Getting alignment, briefing people, making sure people are brought in, socialization, getting exceptions approved by the senior management, passing instructions on down. Only about 25% on average of a middle manager's time is spent actually coaching, supervising people. And yet these middle managers became middle managers because they are pretty skilled and they're not using the skills. It's incredibly wasteful to have people just focused on that. But the world can transform with AI. In workforces where AI has become really infused, about 65% of managers' time is spent with people, doing the stuff that they're really skilled to do, just like doctors are really doing the stuff now that they're really skilled to do. They're focused on coaching, on the human side of interactions, things that AI simply cannot do. They lead cross-functional teams. We'll get to that in a little bit. They override AI systems. They see what's missing. They contribute to future improvements of the systems. They use the full suite of their capabilities. And in order to really excel in that, they need to be outstanding at one thing that is sadly declining in the AI age, and that is critical thinking. We cannot be like school kids who use AI to complete our homework. Yeah, they might get a decent grade, but they're doing themselves a tremendous disservice. They have to learn the critical thinking skills because it's the critical thinking skills that tell you what's missing from the AI outputs. How do you connect the AI outputs to something else that people are seeing? What's wrong? What needs to be corrected? How do you translate those outputs to language that people are really going to register with? That's going to get change happening. Critical thinking is a key enabler of management success in the past, but much more so in the future, because that's what's missing in the AI systems. So we all need, as middle managers, to have those capabilities to interrelate cross-functionally, to spot what's missing, and then to excel on the human side of management. Because everybody in middle management, even if you are hired into a hyper-specialized sort of job, everybody's going to have to become a change manager. There's change management throughout an organization. And folks, in your profession, that's really big. You are the stewards of processes. Those processes are going to change. So you have to think about how do you enable that change, not just restrict it. So, okay, senior leaders. What does it mean for senior leadership? You need to think strategically at how does AI change what you want to be great at as an organization? And then how does it change the nature of your organization itself? There aren't many examples yet of how legacy organizations have fundamentally transformed due to AI, but I'll give you one. This is the biggest meal kit company in the world, HelloFresh. Now, any users of meal kits here? Routine users of meal kits. Okay. How many options do you typically get for a meal in your meal kits? 6. Yeah, it's sort of average. And that was the average for HelloFresh as well. It sort of gets 6. They recently changed to being almost infinite in the number of options that you can get, because they have 14 years of history about what people prefer. And for individual consumers, they know that you typically substitute pork for chicken and that you like things really spicy. And they can edit the suggestions that they give you appropriately, the spicy chicken dishes. Now, then they see, do people actually like those? Because they can see how people rate the meals afterwards. And they learn, and they learn. And all that data is proprietary. Being the largest meal kit company in the world, they have a tremendous advantage through all the data that they can collect. They're able to give people this sort of customization that their rivals just can't, because they don't have that degree of data. They've transformed their customer value proposition. That's going really well. But there is a complication in this. The customer value proposition can change, but then in the kitchens, they have to create an almost infinite variety of meals too. You can't just have the Ford assembly line, any color you like as long as it's black. Oh no. Each dish might be different. And then that has implications on procurement as well, because all these ingredients have to be sourced, and they're totally different as well. So the whole organization had to change, from the customer value proposition to the operations to the procurement. And the nature of management also had to change. They became the stewards of the algorithm. People in operations were no longer putting together the Excel of what the production plan would be for the week. No human could possibly do that anymore with this almost infinite variety of dishes that were being used. No, you had to have AI infuse everything, and then people became the stewards of AI. So that's what a truly AI-infused organization looks like. It's not just change in one corner. There are echo effects throughout the organization. And then there's an echo effect in what management has to do to make the most of it. That's the potential. That's also the challenge that we have. Now, our model of organizations is one that we probably grew up with, because I don't think any of us were born before the year 1854. And that is when the org chart was invented. It was created not only in the era of steam railway, it was actually created for a steam railway, the New York and Erie Railroad. They needed some way to ensure that the organization ran in a disciplined fashion, that the trains ran on time and they did not collide. And so people need to be able to take instructions. It is telling of how people thought about the org chart back then that the telegraphs that connected the railways were frequently one way only. Headquarters didn't need to hear what was happening on the tracks. The track people just had to listen. And that is the hierarchical, top-down nature that organization has sort of persisted with since that day. Hierarchy was everything. Now, of course, things got a little bit more complicated. And we had multinational business, we had cross-functional needs for collaboration. And so we went from traditionally top-down organizations to things that could be a little bit more complicated with matrix organizations. But it was really just editing what was there before. It wasn't a true rethinking of what preceded it. Christiana mentioned that one of my earlier books was titled Jobs to be Done. We have an application here of thinking about jobs to be done. Jobs to be done in its traditional construction is about thinking about what jobs customers are trying to get done. But we also can think about what jobs organizations are trying to get done. Not jobs in terms of this is my job description, this is what I get paid to do. But no, those fundamental units of work. If we deconstruct what an organization is and what it has to accomplish, what are those fundamental units of work? Microsoft has done this. They are replacing org charts with what they call work charts, where they deconstruct the units of work. Capital One has done this. They have constructed their organization around customer journeys. So there are cross-functional groups that own different parts of a customer journey. Meta does this. You have cross-functional teams that are responsible for things like collecting data from advertisers' websites, educating how advertisers are going to use the meta technologies. That is the unit of work to which things are deconstructed at. Procter & Gamble, now there's a legacy organization. It's been around about as long as the steam railway. They are doing this too. They're transforming into what's called an outcomes-oriented organization, where they're focused on having cross-functional teams. More importantly, where they don't have the people to contribute cross-functionally, they have what are called cybernetic teammates. They are wiring in AI into their operations. So there aren't enough packaging people to be on every single product team. And yet through AI, packaging can be represented. Wonder how that might work for internal audit, where there aren't enough of you to be around, but maybe through cybernetic teammates can. So it's a very different construct of an organization. So for the senior leadership then, you need to re-examine some of the old ideas. You really need to step back, think, what are you going to be great at? But then also, what is your organization going to look like? Rethink your business. Map the work. Don't just map how people are employed today. That's how you start transforming the nature of the organization. That's how you create the modern version of the assembly line, where you're not just sprinkling AI on top of things, but you're thinking, how can AI fundamentally change the way that work gets done? Now, for all of us, no matter what role you have, what seniority you have in an organization, there are two lines that are going to tell you a lot about your future. The first is the world as it exists today, where there is a roughly linear relationship between your capability and your output. Better people get more stuff done. AI changes that. Now, there's been dispute between two schools of thought in people studying the effects of AI in workplaces. One school of thought says that AI makes really mediocre employees decent. Okay. And then the other school of thought says that AI is really for the best performers because it supercharges them. The reality is both are true. Both are true. So you lift up the bottom end of the distribution, the mediocre do become decent, but then the best people get supercharged. They are the critical thinkers. They're the ones who understand AI and the nature of how their organization is being rewired. Now, folks, you want to be at the far end of that, right? You want to be the hyper performers with the critical thinking skills, with the change management, with the human relation skills. That's where the great potential of AI gets unlocked. Will there be fewer of the mediocre performers? Yeah, there probably will be. There will still be some. There will be fewer. But if you're really good with AI, if you embrace it and don't have it happen to you, you can be at the far end of that distribution. And you can be one of the folks who are supercharged. That's where you want to be. The promise of AI, the promise of this book, is that you can be cheaper, faster, better, all at the same time. It's what Ford accomplished with the assembly line. It's not a trade-off. You can do it all, but you have to embrace it. You need to lead the change and champion adaptation. Champion those octopus-like capabilities of not only adjusting to the meteor strikes, because AI is a meteor strike, but also of adjusting where the intelligence in your organization lives. It's not all in the central head, it's in the arms. It's throughout the connection of the arms. It's a rewiring of the nervous system, the organization system that your companies have. That's how you win with AI. That's how you become a leader, not a follower, a place where people want to work, a place that unlocks talent, because now talent can operate at its very full potential and not be distracted into meaningless drudgery. You need to reimagine what's possible for internal audit, but also for your organizations. It's not just putting electrical machines where there used to be steam machines. That's nice. You can sprinkle a little AI dust on, and that will do the same thing. That's nice. That is not transformative. The transformation comes when you have things like the assembly line. So what are those going to be for your organization? And ultimately, you need to remember this. AI is a remarkable technology, but we are wrong if we focus on the technology. When everybody has the same technology, it's the people that make the difference. And folks like you who can unlock that potential in the organizations your people work for. Thanks very much.